there's one thing I'm really excited to see from Apple this year, it's what they're going to do with their Mac lineup. The 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro were total surprises in the design department when it was released a few months ago, and I'm thinking we are going to get the same amount of excitement when we get our first glimpse at Apple's true next-generation Apple Silicon Mac, the M2 MacBook Air. So if you're as excited as I am for the M2 Air, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any info or analysis. And if you're already subscribed, you know where the like button is. It's just your choice whether or not you want to press it or not. Why didn't you like it? So like I alluded to before, the M2 MacBook Air is exciting for a few reasons, but I think the major reason why people are so excited for this new MacBook is because of the rumored new design, because this new design should be a remix of something new with something old, much like the recent M1 Pro MacBook Pros. They were nostalgia-driven with their flat-sided design and more ports, but in the same token, they were also brand new with their reduced bezels and a notch adorning the front display, which a lot of people never speculated that Apple would do that. So the same can be said for this M2 MacBook Air, which I think won't be borrowing necessarily from the past designs of the MacBook Air, but will instead turn its inspiration to a distant cousin in the form of the 12-inch MacBook. Yes, the 12-inch MacBook, although considered one of the rare failures or missteps in Apple's product line decisions, was, I think we can safely say, ahead of its time for what Apple was hoping to achieve with this laptop. The 12-inch MacBook was and remains the lightest MacBook ever to ship, weighing in at just 2 pounds and had the smallest form factor out of any MacBook that we have ever seen, with even smaller dimensions than the 11-inch MacBook Air. And if you really look at ultra-portable laptop options offered by Apple, we can see that even though the 13-inch Air is great, it still just really isn't in that same class of really ultra portable and light laptops. Well, thankfully, this new MacBook Air is rumored to be slimming down to a point where it may not necessarily go as far as the ultra portable 12-inch, but it should be in between what we have now with the current Air and that 12-inch MacBook. So think of a slimmer and lighter MacBook Air, but one that doesn't sacrifice as much to get to that point. And what I mean by that is, current rumors say that the M2 MacBook Air will be getting smaller, but also still retain its full-size 13-inch display. Now, while this effect on the MacBook Pro gave it a bigger display, this time Apple will be offsetting the bezel decrease by adjusting for a smaller footprint and not a bigger screen, meaning they can cram the same screen size we have now on the Air into a smaller form factor. And looking at what Apple did with the MacBook Pro redesign, we could see Apple explore some similar design traits, with them adding the notch and also borrowing some design inspiration from the 24-inch iMac, and really cementing the MacBook Air as a consumer-level product by giving users a nice range of different colors to choose from to make the Air even more of a personal computer. And because it keeps that same display size, again, the bezels are reduced, and that means the overall volume is reduced, and that means this M2 Air is rumored to be shedding a few pounds as well. There's not really concrete rumors on how much the M2 Air will weigh, but I think it will probably be right in between the weight of the 12-inch MacBook and the current Air design. So I would probably estimate it to be around 2.4 pounds in weight, and I imagine it will get as thin as possible while still retaining whatever thickness is necessary for the key travel for Apple's Magic Keyboard. It will also need enough space to fit in another port. Magsafe. Yes, it is widely rumored that the next MacBook Air will be able to fit in at least one more port into its design, with Mark Gurman and John Prosser both reporting that the Air's redesign will be fitting in the newly rebirthed Magsafe charging port, and in Prosser's mockups we can also see another nice thing about the Air's new design, and that is a Thunderbolt USB-C port on both the left and the right side of the device. In total, that means you would have 3 ports, and while it's not a huge boon in the port selection from the previous Air, the utility of having ports on each side of the device and a dedicated charging port will be a nice comfort to have for plugging in additional accessories while still keeping your MacBook charged. The best part about this Air's design is that while the slimming down of a design may have ruffled a few feathers just a few short years ago, this time Apple will be able to approach this newer design with the power of Apple Silicon on its side. And while these design choices in the past would have resulted in a slower machine that was thermally constrained, with Apple Silicon and the M2 chip, This should ensure that this design won't get super hot, all while delivering even more performance upgrades than what the M1 chip was capable of. And in some ways, the M2 Air could be even stronger in certain performance metrics than something like the M1 Pro MacBook Pros, because the M2 is the true next generation of Apple Silicon and will be even faster in single-core performance than those more expensive laptops. And it could be snappier in daily use for applications which don't utilize a bunch of CPU cores. And I suspect the M2 Air will be no slouch in that area too, because it will still have the same 4 high-performance cores that the M1 chip has, but they will be running at higher clock speeds, meaning it should still receive a significant boost not only in single-core performance, but in multi-core performance as well. I think the area where we will really notice the weakness of the M2 chip compared to the M1 Pro and M1 Max, though, is in the graphics department, and that's because the M1 Pro and Max chip is mostly made up of GPU cores, with the Pro sporting a 16 GPU core Max, and then the Max version sporting a whopping 32-core GPU design. The M2 Air is just rumored to come with 10 of those GPU cores on the highest end, and it's likely we will see some bin-down versions of the M2 chip, which will probably make their way into the entry-level model of this Air, so we could see GPU design starting at 9 cores for the entry-level model. Still, the M2 sounds like it will be an improvement over the already fast and efficient M1 chip, which means high performance and good battery life all in an ultra slimmed down laptop with a better design and even more colors to choose from. And I think the best reason to get excited for this Air is because we may even see a mini LED display in it, bringing what I think is the most consumer beneficial Pro feature that the Pro MacBook Pros have, and bringing it down to the more affordable laptop range, where more people can appreciate just how great that display is. And in a lot of ways, I think this Air will be very similar to the 12.9-inch iPad Pro in hardware features, and both will share a similar display and the M2 chip. Based on that, the Air may also be in for a bit of a price increase, with maybe moving the price bracket up from $999 to probably closer to somewhere around $1,200. And that's not unreasonable given the price hike we have recently seen on those latest MacBook Pros. And while it's a lot of money, it's nowhere near the $2,000 asking price of the Pro model, so more people should actually be able to get their hands on this laptop. Either way, I think that when you take all of these hardware and design improvements and factor them into this next generation package, it's no surprise why this M2 MacBook Air is so hotly anticipated, and I am really excited to actually see one in person, but we may have to wait a bit longer because I think based on the current Apple Silicon timeframe, this product might not be released towards the end of this year, possibly sometime around the fall in October of 2022, but hopefully I'm wrong on that, and hopefully we see this announced a lot sooner, but I think Apple wants to get through the rest of their Apple Mac product line and replace the 27-inch iMac and Mac Pro and the Intel Mac Mini with Apple Silicon before they tackle the next generation of Macs with these M2 Macs, and more specifically, the M2 MacBook Air. But when I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air, I called it the best laptop out there, and I gotta imagine that I'm gonna have some similar feelings about this M2 Air. But be sure to let me know what you think, and more importantly, are you waiting for an M2 MacBook Air? I really want to hear if you're excited for it and if you're deciding to wait for this laptop, or are you planning on going with another option? As always, if you like this video, be sure to leave me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.